It's really hot. I'm really overheated. Hello and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, you're very welcome. This is Reading the Past and I'm Dr. Cat. And today, while I am filming in the coolest room of the house, it is still absolutely roasting hot. The mercury is rising and London is boiling. And that got me to thinking about clothes, unsurprisingly, how we dress and what we choose to wear. And that then led me on to thinking about a particular set of objects that used to have an incredible cultural weight and prominence for our ancestors. They still exist today and are still in use, but they are not the everyday necessity that they used to be. Today, I want to talk about pins and the art of pinning for dress. When you were getting ready today, putting on your clothes, you would have been reliant, perhaps without even thinking about it, on a variety of technologies to make the task easier, that enabled you to put clothes on your body, fit them to your form so that they didn't fall off or look shapeless. And all of these things prevented you from having to effectively sew yourself into clothes and then at the end of the day, cut yourself out of them. But who invents these things? When are they invented? And what happens before they exist? One of the earliest of these technologies is the button and buttonhole. This is a medieval invention. However, when it first came about, it was the preserve of the elite. To create a buttonhole that can safely hold a button requires a lot of work and labour. As you can see, this is hand-stitched around the buttonhole. The democratisation of buttons doesn't occur until mechanisation of clothes production appears. And that is a factor of the 19th century and the later Industrial Revolution. Perhaps you fastened your clothes with a zipper today. Well, the earliest item that even comes close to resembling a zipper, which was patented as a shoe fastener, doesn't appear until 1893. Maybe you used poppers or snap fasteners. For that, you'd have to wait till 1885. Maybe you love Velcro. Well, that isn't around until 1941. So, with no access to Velcro, zippers or poppers, and with quite limited access, based upon class, to buttons with holes, how are the people of early modern and medieval England getting dressed? Well, for the most part, they're using points. This is a lace that may have a metal tip on the end that goes through the holes that have been born into garments. It might be used to close the front of a garment, or it might be used to attach pieces of a garment to each other, maybe the sleeve to the body of a garment. And what this enables is for clothes to be form-fitting and also for them to be changed up. If you want to put a different sleeve on a gown to make it look new, then you can, because it's not all one piece. It fits together and is held together with these laces. The other item that is used in ever-increasing quantities as fashions evolve and become more complex are pins. Now, this is not the safety pin that you might use in a pinch if an item of clothing is too loose or maybe even torn, because the safety pin, like this one you see here, isn't invented until 1849. So our medieval and early modern counterparts are using straight pins. These, I think, you're probably most familiar with if you go to get your clothes altered. It's the thing that a tailor puts in the bottom of your trousers or skirt to get your hemline right. Ladies who cover their head today, they may also be using straight pins. But broadly speaking, most people are not using straight pins on a daily basis. However, if you were in medieval and certainly early modern England, you could not have got dressed without them. Pins have been used for dressing and decoration of attire, we believe, for millennia. The date for the earliest use of pins is given variously as 4,000 and 3,000 years BCE. Now, pins might be made of bits of thorn from a bush, they could be wood, bone, stone, and latterly metal. They can be very functional and also incredibly decorative. Now, although there is this extraordinary span of history in which pins are being used for dress, as you are aware, I'm sure, Most of these earlier centuries and millennia are not my area of speciality. So today I will be focusing on the use of pins for dress in early modern England, because it is my area of expertise, but also because for me it's the most interesting. We start to see these hyper-real portraits, the kind produced by Hans Holbein, and we can, through these portraits, see an evolution of style. As the fashions become more and more elaborate, it becomes an absolute necessity to use more and more pins. We can see in the span of a few decades the absolute necessity of these pins in order to achieve the elite fashions that the portraits show. So while there may have been an explosion in the number of pins being used to dress elite bodies in early modern England, that doesn't mean that pins were not absolutely vital in the medieval period. For vast proportions of this time, you would have been importing your pins into England from France. In the 15th and 16th century, however, you also had the option of buying home-produced pins, quite literally. Pin making happened in private homes, and they would be producing items like this, which I found while I was out mudlarking. And it's quite possible that this is not massively visible, so I will do a close-up if it's not. But what you can see here is a small pin with a sharpened tip and a head. And if you look closely at the head, you can see that it's been knotted. The way this is made is with a pinner's bone. And I'm going to pull up an image of a pinner's bone, and you can see that grooves have been made in the bone. In this, you place the wire that you're going to make your pin out of. The pinner then files the wire to a point. The head is made by being tied and then soldered to seal it. Because these pinheads are so small, it becomes necessary for somebody with quite dexterous fingers and keen eyes. We believe that a lot of this work would have been done by women or children. So within these cottage industries of pin making in 15th and 16th century England, it seems that it is a family affair. It isn't until 1622 that the first pin making factory is established in Gloucestershire by John Tilsby. Now, while this is a factory where lots of people are making pins all at once, it is of course not mechanised. It's 1622. For the mechanisation of pin making in Britain, we're going to have to wait till 1838, where it begins to occur in a factory in Birmingham. In the term pin money, which is perhaps a little arcane for us even now, we see the hangover of this need for pins to dress. In the 20th century, pin money was a term that was used to describe things that you would buy for the household, milk for the fridge, or maybe even batteries for the remote. But the origins of that term is in the necessity of pins for dressing. Husbands, brothers and fathers would provide the women in their life with money to go and buy the pins that they needed so that they could dress in the most fashionable style as befitted their time and also their social rank. I'd like to share with you a couple of examples of how pins would have been used. Now, these are portraits from the 1500s, and so they show incredibly elite sitters. But one is from the first half of the 1500s and one is from the latter half of the 1500s. In the first image of Jane Seymour, painted by Hans Holbein in 1536. If you look on the sides of her gown, just by her arms, you can see rows of telltale circles. These are the pinheads that are holding in place the stomacher of her gown. Now, what this is probably masking is the laces that are holding the body of her gown together. A stomacher goes over the top so that you're not seeing those laces. It makes it look like one single piece of fabric when it actually wasn't. In this case, the stomacher matches the gown. But there are also alternatives where a gown might be a less elaborate fabric and you might put a bolder stomacher in there so that it looks more expensive. Equally, the stomachers could be interchangeable. So you may have a rather plain or a plainer outer gown and a vibrant patterned stomacher, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 stomachers. So you can take an individual gown and wear it different ways. It looks like you have more variety in your wardrobe in this way, and therefore like you perhaps have more money in your family. As I mentioned, fashions constantly evolved and changed and became more elaborate, and evidence of this is found in this portrait. It is the Ermine portrait of Elizabeth I by Nicholas Hilliard that is dated to 1585. Now, while we can't see those same telltale pinheads that we saw in the image of Jane Seymour, we can certainly see that pins are being used here. Working from the top, Elizabeth is wigged here, and in her hair she has decorations of pearls. These would presumably have been on straight pins. Maybe they would not have been quite so sharpened as they're going near to the scalp, and pearls decorate the tops. No knotted little pins here. These are elaborate decorative pins. Moving down, we see her lace ruff. When it had been freshly laundered, this lace ruff would have been a single long piece of fabric that would then have been starched. Once starched, it would have been set using irons that look quite like a curling tong, actually. That would be how you get these circles, the figure 8 shape that is so common with ruffs. Now the starch holds it in some way and the heat also sets it, but to maintain its shape, it would have been held together with a crisscross of straight pins. So essentially, all around Elizabeth's neck would have been sharp, straight pins, holding her ruff in place. The veil she wears would have been pinned to her garments, and the cuffs that sit at her wrists would also have been pinned in place. What pins can do is they enable people to attach pieces that needed to be laundered. Elizabeth and her ladies are not going to be washing her main gown. The jewels, for example, would have had to be all taken off, and also this may well be velvet that is simply not washable at this time. But the white lace cuffs and the white lace ruff could have been laundered. So the pins enable you to take off the things that can be washed. It also means, as with Jane Seymour stomacher, that parts of your garment can be interchangeable. So you can have different looks in various forms. The pins themselves, as we see in this image of Elizabeth, range in their function. The ones at her head are extraordinarily delicate and decorative. Meanwhile, the things that are holding her ruff in place and her wrist cuffs, and equally her veil, are less visible. These are functional pins, but she would undoubtedly have needed hundreds of pins to dress with this level of magnificence. The early modern period is, in many ways, the central point, the eye of the storm of the heyday of pinning, for dress and for decoration. Today, it's largely been relegated. If you do have straight pins at home, they're probably in your sewing kit, something that you use if you quickly need to hem a trouser or a skirt. It's not something that most people wear on them every day as they leave the house. And perhaps the last great hurrah of the straight pin is in the early 20th century, in the Edwardian period, when women were wearing hats like this, and they required enormously long straight pins to affix their hat to their elaborate hairstyle. In addition to securing hats safely to hair, these straight pins, it would seem, also provided ladies with a defensive weapon. There are tales, like this one, of a woman being accosted on public transport and using the hat pin to defend her honour. There was also alarm that suffragettes may remove their hat pins and use them as offensive weapons. For centuries then, women have been in charge of storing up pins in order for them to dress themselves and their families, to maintain their social standing and also their modesty, both by ensuring that they are covered with fabric, but as we see in the Edwardian period, when the pins become longer, they use them as weapons to defend their modesty in that regard too. It is fascinating to me that these pins were so integral to everyday life throughout so much of our history, and yet now, because of the development of fabric technologies and fastening, they are almost entirely forgotten for their original purpose. And I wonder if you can think of any other objects that are being treated similarly. Are there things that were so integral to our past that we may be forgetting in our future? Or even ideas and practices? If you would like me to talk about any of those, if there's any you can think of, then please do pop it in the comment section down below. Or come and find me over on social media. I'll leave the links in the description box. You can follow me there and we can continue the conversation. I'd love to know what you think about this video, so do let me know. And I hope you've enjoyed it and found it useful. If you did, then please tell me by clicking the thumbs up button. Please also subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon so that YouTube tells you when I've next uploaded. I hope you're going to have a great day whatever you're doing and that you are staying out of the heat as best you can. And I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video where I will hopefully be a lot less sticky. Take care of yourselves. Bye bye for now.